if you live in the south or the Midlands of England or South Wales, you won't need me to tell you it's been very hot indeed. Inevitably, exceptional weather makes us think again about climate change. Some will tell you that last week was just an example of the weather, but I think we all know, do we not, that heat waves are caused by global temperatures going up, and the summers that we now experience are vastly different to the summers we experienced when we were children. I'm not sure that's a controversial opinion. What can be done about it? The government is under huge pressure to ease its attempts to cut CO2 emissions. Critics say the drive to net zero is making us poorer and won't make any difference as this country produces only a tiny fraction of the world's greenhouse gases. Is now the time to come to adapt to warmer summers rather than to try in vain to stop them happening? Zoe Garbett is the Green Party Mayor of Hackney, joins us now. Zoe, morning to you.
Good morning.
Do you think the issue of climate change generally has fallen down the political agenda?
I think it has for some. It definitely hasn't for me or the Greens, but I definitely feel like nationally it's not spoken about as much as it should be. And like you've just described, we've seen extreme heat over the last week, and I know that's made things really difficult for workers and families and people going about their day to day. We've seen 1,300 deaths across Europe. So, it should be something that's that needs to be looked at, and it's good that you're having the discussion today.
It's the fundamental problem, though, when we have this discussion. I can see people will get in touch with us this morning and say, it doesn't really matter what we do when it comes to climate change. Britain accounts for less than 1% of carbon emissions. I know we had more in the past, but where we are now. So actually discussing net zero or our bid to net zero is kind of irrelevant when it comes to the global emissions.
I'd say that we need to do our bit, and we need to also be a leader. There's lots of areas that the UK wants to be a leader in, and I think this is one where we could be showing innovation, utilising our local wind and local resources and doing more that we can locally. And also, a lot of the time, the things that to address a climate crisis also make our lives better. Things like local food supply, making our homes easier to heat, easier to cool, making them more comfortable, less damp and mould. All those things that we're trying to do to make our lives better also have a positive impact on our climate emissions and therefore make the world a better place. So I think it's about having that broad look at the actions that we want to take.
But there's the broad look, then there's the personal look. I'm just interested because we've had this debate, I think, over the last couple of years, or maybe since the whole time this show's existed. Do you think people should say, the climate is changing, I'm going to eat less meat, I'm going to drive less, I'm going to fly less? Would you say people should do that? Because in and of itself, that will make very little difference to overall carbon emissions. And therefore people say, well, why should I change my habits because it won't actually make the world a better place?
Yeah, so absolutely. I feel like there's personal and system responsibilities, and we know that it's the oil industries that have forced us to look at our personal behaviours and shift away from some of the big corporates and some of the systems that are causing the most damage. There's companies, like Amazon and some of those massive companies that do operate globally, and if they took more responsibility, then they definitely have a bigger impact. But that's not saying that everyone has a personal responsibility, and we can all be taking personal actions, but also kind of making sure that they're having those wider system actions.
So would you say to people, as a Green Party politician, would you ever look at people in the eye and say, fly less, eat less meat, drive less?
But I think I'd frame it as I've just described. I think I always say to people, I want to push for those systems changes that are going to bring carbon down. But I also say that I'm a vegan. I'm not forcing everyone else to be vegan. But I think if people want to make more climate positive decisions, I think that they should do. But we know that things like railway is way more expensive than people driving. So it's things like, how is the government and the system making those green choices easier for people? So I think it's about having that wider conversation about how we make the greener choices cheaper and easier for people.
What about the thorny issue of aircon? Would you like to see new builds in Hackney have aircon fitted as they're built?
Well, I think it's really difficult to have this conversation when we know that their excess deaths are caused by heat. I've got a background in the NHS, and we used to plan for the winter as much as we used to plan for the summer, especially around care homes, older people, young people. I want to see a world where we're doing as much as we can to bring the temperatures down, but I'm not going to, stand in the way of making sure that people are able to live comfortably. So
does that include air conditioning? Because it's funny, we talked about this a lot last week, that air conditioning is a weirdly moral issue in Britain. It's not in other parts of the world necessarily. Do you think that as new builds go up, air conditioning could be fitted reasonably?
I mean, I think it's a really difficult conversation to have, and we've got a mayor of London who's changing some of the planning rules and some of the housing rules around kind of dual aspect, which we know is one of the ways that really compounds heat within new builds. Like, we need places to be able to be built in ways that they have that natural cooling. We also know that our current planning system means that people are sometimes not designing those buildings in ways that allow proper kind of airflow through them. So I think it's about looking at how we design the best buildings, how we get our heating and cooling systems, and making sure that they're delivering the best comfortable environments for people.
I was reading a piece that you wrote for a magazine where you called the Supreme Court ruling on gender shameful. That Supreme Court ruling said being a woman is a matter of biological sex. Can you explain to our listeners how a legal statement of what is a biological fact is shameful?
It's because I think we've got to a position in this country where we're having a debate about people's existence, and I don't think that's where we should be. I think that that's not what many people in Hackney want. They want our residents to be able to live full, thriving lives, and I think the discussions about the existence of our trans siblings is really, really inhumane, and I think that this latest guidance is just another step in that direction. So my statements are around responding to what I hear from my residents, and about us wanting to have communities that are inclusive and allow people to live fulfilling lives. We know that our trans communities are experiencing some of the highest health inequalities, really struggle to engage fully in everyday life, and I just think this government needs to take a responsibility for that.
So what about the rights of women to not have men in their spaces? That's the competing right there.
I don't think it is a competing right, because if we look at facts, women are way more under threat from a domestic partner than they are from trans people. So I think it's...
No, they are, but equally the question is there a rule that requires... Well, there is a rule. There's a law that says women should be able to have access to spaces that biological men cannot. That is now a right that's enshrined in law. When you say that trans women should be allowed into there, you are competing against that right.
I think that the guidance hasn't been accepted yet. We're waiting to see if the government are going to reject the EHRC guidance, which I think, in many organisations, Good Law Project are saying creating third spaces for trans people is against their human rights and against the Equalities Act. So I think I think this is something we need to keep looking at.
But the Supreme Court ruling is the Supreme Court ruling. It's called the Supreme Court for a reason. They've said biological sex means a woman is someone who's born a woman. I'm just interested, as Hackney Mayor, you can't do anything about that, can you? Are you saying that trans women should have rights to women's only spaces in Hackney? Would you support that?
I think what we need to talk about is how people are living their everyday lives and what people... I'm talking to kind of Trans Legal Clinic and other organisations to make sure that the rights of trans people aren't being excluded from public life and that people are able to get the support and the services that they need. So
do you want, broadly, you want trans women to be able to access women's spaces in Hackney? You would like that to happen?
I deeply care about the safety of women in Hackney. I've made this a priority. I've retained community safety in my responsibilities because domestic violence in this country needs to seriously be looked at. And I think this whole conversation is completely ignoring the fact that women are most under threat from a domestic partner,
we very much
regularly
have conversations about domestic violence. I know that you care about that, but my question's a slightly different one. Would you like there to be in Hackney the fact that trans women can enter women-only spaces?
So I think it's about what we're talking about in terms of women-only spaces. Like, trans women, for me, should have the right to access women's spaces. That's, they are women.
Well, they're not according to the law. That's precisely what the Supreme Court's saying. They're not biological women.
But I think this is why we need to look at what spaces we're talking about, how
it might be changing rooms, it might be refuges, places where women want to be away from men. The law says that trans women are not allowed there, and I think you're saying you wouldn't want to uphold that law. But
trans women are women, and they face higher risks of sexual violence than most.
But they're not women. But they're not women according to the Supreme Court.
But then I think, then that's where I think we have a problem, and I think we'll continue to see that challenged, because if we want to keep women safe, then this ruling doesn't do that.
OK, I understand. But I thought that's what you were saying. I just wanted to have that clarified. Zoe, good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Zoe Garbett, they're the Green Party Mayor of Hackney.